Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
If we want to be climate resilient, we have to have a multitude of pathways, and we all have to work together on that. Just a few more slides to that in that context, and then we'll go on to see country scorecards, what I promised you. These are markers from the for food insecurity. That means food related losses in production, or climate related losses in production, starting from 1970 all the way up to 2013. And what we can see is the orange dots are drought related, blue is other climate related, for example, too much water, floods, the losses there. So if you see over here, there are fewer large events. The size of the bubble marks the amount of loss. There are smaller events that happen, but as we go towards recent years, these events are more frequent and bigger. And so there are impacts that are felt in almost similar impacts in almost every sector, where we are seeing more changes and more drastic changes. We can map this as a way of vulnerability. So these are continents that are mapped here. This is here economics, population, information, policy, money that's available, and information that's available. Because I forget them all, this is what the key is. So okay, I was told to be here and use the mouse, and I forgot. So, so this here is the economic marker, and that's on the top left side. The socio-cultural markers, how much acceptance there is for changes, or what is the vulnerability in socio-economic terms or socio-cultural terms. That is loss of the way of living, loss of the cultural methods that are commonly followed. This here is human capacity, and out here we have governance and policy, finance, and then finally information awareness and technology. And we can map these, and you can see that there is no continent that is saved from these losses or vulnerabilities, and by far the largest threat is to these small nations, small island nations, because they stand to lose almost everything. We can go further and we can look at economic inequality. This can be defined in many different ways. This here is the so-called Gini coefficient. It's on a scale from 0 to 1. A larger number means there is higher inequality. And so you have inequality. These data are from Our World in Data. You can plot them like I've done here, or you can download the information in the form of a table. And so we see that there are some countries which have higher economic inequality, some not as much. Would you have expected more or less? US would have less inequality? Honey, you should go to US. There is very large inequality in the US. You would be surprised. We did some field work in a Native American reservation, and I took students there because I wanted them to see what parts of US look like. There was places on the reservation without running water, without electricity. They went by daylight. That was all they had, or some lamps that they could burn. There was no electricity. There was no cable. People were not, the supplier, energy supplier was not willing to lay out cable because it was not lucrative. There were not enough paying people. So it's very real. And this is on reservations. If you go into poorer parts of the country, this is in the US, you will have very similar hutments, and not on the same scale. The thing which you have to understand is we look at the absolute level of living and we equate one to the other, but you can't do that. You have to look at the difference. Right? What this is marking is the difference. So people might have stone houses or brick houses or concrete houses instead of mud houses. But the difference in the way they live versus the way the 1% live is a huge gap. And that's what this index is marking, right? So that is a big difference. It's possible. There are multiple reasons for it. One is the smaller population density. The other one is technology advances. The third one is history. If you look at how a nation has developed, how old it is, and it is by all means, how many people is the government trying to support on the money it has. The third one is, what is the source of income? Is it a rich nation or not a rich nation? So in cases, no, it's just in cases of Australia or Canada, you think of big companies that might not be as present there. Yes.
Just a clarification.
Yes.
Country next to India, Pakistan.
Yes.
And Afghanistan.
Yeah.
You mean to say they have lesser economic inequality compared to India? How is it so?
Possibly, because if you think of Ambani's and Godrej and all of these, this is counting not the economic, the wealth of a nation. This is counting how rich is the richest person, how poor is the poorest person. The whole thing might be shifted. There might be a static shift, right? You might be up or down on that scale, but the difference is what is being counted. So I think that makes sense. That's also okay. Yeah. If everyone's poor, we are all equally poor, right? Okay. So your misery is same as my misery, so I can bear it, right? But if you are more happy than I am, then I'm really miserable. So that's really what it's trying to say. So we're looking at, so there might be up and down, and yes, you point into a very interesting thing, that together with this, there should be also the economic wealth either of a nation by way of GDP or by way of poverty. So there should be a poverty index on this also, which is not there. So it doesn't tell you the full thing, right? So that's and I think I had it somewhere. I removed it because I didn't think to put it in here. But that would be also needed to say, if we have this sort of a picture, if everyone's rich here, no, let's not take South Africa. Let's take Saudi Arabia. Everyone's rich. Okay, it can be, you can have the royal family and you can have the normal people, but they're all rich, so it doesn't really matter. So you can be out here on your Gini index, everyone's living happily. That same color in a place like Colombia or Ecuador or something might be very different, where people are poorer, right? So then it makes a big difference if you have richer either technologists or richer industrialists versus a very poor segment of society. So that's really what this means. It doesn't mean absolute income. Okay, so I promised you that we will look at country scorecards, so let's look at that. There is a website, Climate Tracker, and what they do is they look at every country. Let's just scroll forward. Sorry, yeah. If you go on their website, they will list every country that has NDCs, and they will give them a score. Now you can agree with it, or you can say, no, this is not really good. We have to do it different, but this is one way of doing it. And they say, are they passing everything? No one's doing that. Are they almost sufficient? Yes. Insufficient in orange, highly insufficient in red, and in black is critically insufficient. As always, this doesn't mean that they're doing a fantastic job. It could be that the countries that are almost sufficient had very small goals to meet with, right? So you can say, I will do this, I will go from here to the end of the room, and I know I can meet it because it's really not a goal, it's something that I'm doing anyway. And you say, I will run to the main gate, and that's a big challenge to meet, right? So that this here is not saying that. It's just saying, what did I pledge? Where do I stand? And so if you look at that, this is the scorecard for India. You have overall rating of highly insufficient, and it's divided up into 4 categories. One is climate finance. India has said, we are not a rich nation, we cannot meet the goals on our own, we need finance from outside, so this is not applicable, right? We have unconditional goals to meet for NDC targets. We are insufficient there. There are conditional NDC targets to be met. We are highly insufficient. And each one of them has a little description. There is a fair share, and there is a domestic pathway that we said, and policies and actions. So policies and actions, again, insufficient, right? If you, maybe I can do that. Let's see if we can. So if you click on that, here is the scorecard. It has explanation, just an overview. You can go in and say what were the targets that India had. There is an overview of what the targets were, so it lists everything. So the nice thing is you can go in and pull up the scorecard for every country and see what did they say they will do, what did they actually do. Again, and you can step through everything. If you want to have all the countries together, you can say everything in an overview. That should bring up, there you go. That should bring up all the countries. This is the list that I had shown you earlier. And you can go in on a map view and pull up whichever country you want. And it gives you a very quick assessment, and then you can go into a full assessment. So this becomes a very interesting tool if I am a policymaker and I am trying to design my policies for my country and say, or let's say I'm the state of Tamil Nadu, and I'm looking at it saying, what can Tamil Nadu do for the NDCs that the central government declared? So either you say, well, this is really not fair because we have a very large economy. We cannot do everything what the government said we will do, because otherwise the economy would falter, and then the income for the federal government will be less. So, or the central government will be less. So there are many different ways of looking at this, many different ways of using it. The interesting part is to have that information and go through and try and see where do we stand. This is where the US stands. You have a summary of all of the targets they said they will do. These are the declared targets, what the US pledged to do, and we can go through every one of these to see how much did the country pledge and how much are they doing. So it becomes a very powerful tool to use because it is something that we can do to judge where we are and where we want to be. If we compare this, we can go, that's the US, here's China. So if we look at this just at face value, again, it might not be the full picture. As you can see with every marker that we have used, it is not the full picture. The income inequality index doesn't give you the full picture. The NDCs don't give you the full picture. You have to look at all of the markers together to say, where do we stand? What did the country say they will do? Was it enough? Was it their fair share? Was it their allocated share? Or did they go over and above and said, we think this is a real thing to be done. We need to meet the challenges and we will do that in this manner. Okay, so one thing which we do want to address is the carbon dioxide levels, and we had addressed this right in the first day. But if we look at the historic levels, we do have a fluctuation. We have an overall reduction that happened from the ancient times all the way down to here. We look at the last couple million years and more recently in recent history. When we look at comparing what's happening, we are taking this as a guideline. 270 ppm pre-industrialization. If you remember the Keeling curve, I think we have a picture here. That's the Keeling curve from Mauna Loa, the island in the middle of the Pacific. 320 ppm, little less than 320. Sorry? How is it estimated? From isotope studies. So some of these are through ice cores. You have air trapped in ice bubbles in the ice. So you take that air and you sample it and you analyze that. The others are through mineralization, what types of isotopes are fixed in the minerals. So that's one of the biggest way of doing it. There is a lot of uncertainty in the numbers that we have there. And part of it is also from analyzing how the Earth was formed, what the atmosphere consisted of, looking at current formation of planets. So that's the, yeah. Sure. So you can look at fossils, you can look at shell thicknesses, and that tells you what carbon levels were there, how is it being fixed, so there are multiple ways of determining the amount of carbon dioxide that would have existed to allow the organisms to grow, especially the ones that grow out of calcium, have a calcium based system, to analyze how big they were, how small, how thin walled, how thick walled. And that allows you to relate back to what the carbon levels were. So there are multiple pieces of information that go into these geologic records of carbon dioxide. Okay. These are not direct measurements. We have no way of sampling the fossil atmospheres, except if it's trapped in ice core. So if you have air bubbles trapped, then you get that, but there's not much in millions of years. We don't have that much information. So this has to come from indirect measures. Okay. Is that your question? Yeah. Okay. So we have so part of the climate conversations that happen where people are saying, no, this is really you're making too much out of a very small thing, is because of these levels of carbon dioxide that we say had existed. And so this is geologic, this is natural. You cannot change the way geology works, the way the earth works. This is a natural system. So that's some of the arguments that people use, where the acceleration that's happening in past years is much more than what we had expected to see. Okay, so what I would like to do next is to go over a little bit of yes, we have it there. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about pathways to success, how we're going to get there, and then we will try and see who's going to pay for it. Now, we've been talking about this, right? We've been talking about the natural sink and what we have put on top of it, and how much do we need to mitigate if we are going to solve the problem. And we come up with about 10 gigatons of carbon needed to meet the capacity that we have pledged to keep by 2050. We're nowhere close to it. We are right now sequestering maybe 500,000 per project, in maximum 500,000 per ton. The major amount is in EOR projects, which recycle carbon dioxide. You leave behind about 30 to 40%. That's about it. So there's not much storage there. There is another very interesting website, and that is the Climate Action Tracker. And they have a Climate Action Tracker thermometer that counts up temperature and as color coded what the change will be dependent on what actions we will take. The 1.5 degrees is right here. This is the goal for the Paris Agreement. We are right here. This is November 2024, just last month. That's when I pulled this up. So we are here. That's the 1.3 degrees warming in 2023. We don't have very much to go. That's why we say that we most probably are not going to meet it. An optimistic scenario is about 2 degrees centigrade, and that's a mean between the maximum that we think we will reach or the minimum. That's the uncertainty in our models. So this is where we will be, and this optimistic scenario assumes that every country will meet all of the NDCs that they pledged to do, including reaching net zero targets of when they said they would. India's net zero target is, I think, 2050. We'll look at the numbers in a bit. It's 2050, right? Or 2070. So India's net zero targets are 2070. US, I think, has 2050. There are steps towards that. There are 50% reduction by 2030, 100% net zero by 2050. And India has similar targets. If we do all of that, then that is what gets us to optimistic scenario, which is 2.2 degrees centigrade, 1.9 as the average, and the spread is 1.5 to 2.4. If we base our, so this is the recent announced targets. If we use that to base it on the 2030 targets, then we are reaching about 2.1 degrees with 2.7 and 1.7. So 1 degree centigrade spread between that, and so on. So, and if we do policies and actions, this is real world. That means we're really not doing as much. We are pretty certain to reach an average increase of about 2.7 degrees centigrade. So that's the status of where we stand today. You can plot it in a slightly different manner. This is gigatons of carbon dioxide that need to be met. From 1990 onwards, we are here, 2024, and this is the spread, 4.1 to about 4.8, almost 5 degrees centigrade above cast. That doesn't mean every place will have 5 degrees. It might have much more or much less. This is the average temperature increase if nothing is done. By 2030, we should be, by 2030, we should be somewhere here. We're already looking at a change of about 2 degrees centigrade if we are here. If we meet current policies, this is where we'll be. That means we overshoot the 50 gigatons of carbon by a bit, and then by 2080, we are bringing the curve back down. This is the curve if we do pledges and targets. If we do a much more rigorous thing, then we are out here. And 1.5 degree would have gotten us here. So what we are looking at is a shortfall in what we need versus what we said we will do versus what needs to happen. Yet another way to look at this is to say, what are the pathways? What are the emissions pathways to success? This is gigatons of carbon dioxide in emissions per year. And again, we are here, 2024. This is the shortfall here, implementation gap. If we have policies and actions that remain status quo on what we have today, here's where we would be. We should have started much earlier if we wanted to reach 1.5 degrees centigrade. The optimistic scenario has us starting almost immediately. There is a sense of disbelief that this will be met. Right? So the scorecards that you saw help to address the challenge here. So you combine this sort of a prediction with the scorecards that allow you to put likelihoods on each one of these curves, where we will be given what we are doing today. Okay, so who's going to pay for this? Last 10 minutes. Let me just see. I have my slides open here. Yes, indeed. Okay, so we need to get to here, and we say we want to be in the optimistic or the pledge targets, somewhere between here. That's where ideally we'd want to go even below here, but we can't, so let's say we will be here. Right? Okay, so my question to you is, how should we finance this? There are 3 ways, right? There are 3 ways: avoid, reduce, mitigate. So what would you do to avoid generating emissions? How would you reduce your carbon footprint? By the way, have you heard of the website Track Your Carbon Footprint? You should, okay. Tomorrow, if I will make sure to bring it. It's really fun to do. It's sadly, and I hope someone will catch on and build this for India, because it's meant for a Western market, a Western target, specifically US, where you have 2 cars, you have electricity, you have this, you have that, you have all of the accoutrements of US modern life. it would be very useful to do it for India to say, can you track your carbon footprint and then design ways of reducing that. Regardless, given what you're doing today, if it's on you, it's incumbent on you to reduce your footprint, what would you do? Right? That's one thing. What would you avoid doing? I don't need to take a trip. I don't need to fly out. I can call people. I don't need to do this, right? So what are we going to do? I don't need to be here and teach. I can teach online, right? This is what COVID brought us. This was one of the best things that COVID did for us, for all the bad that it did. We learned how to use the internet for what it was meant to be, right? We can do meetings. It's very, very nice. So what would you avoid doing that you're doing today or that you're planning to do? And barring all of those two, what actions would you be willing to take to mitigate your presence here, your carbon footprint? And I remind you, for all of you who are at IIT, this was a very nice thing I read on the recycle bins you have, the 3 R's. What are the 3 R's at IIT? I'm sure you know here, IITM. Yes. Recycle, reuse, reduce. Sorry, this one here. Oh, I didn't bring it in because I thought you would all know and you would all answer me with one throat. But recycle, reuse, reduce. Right? This is pretty much avoid, reduce, mitigate. How much are you willing to pay for that? Does it really depend on how much you... So it's a very interesting point, right? It depends on how much I'm earning. And that's really the crux of COP29. That's what nations are fighting about. I'm not earning as much, so I shouldn't contribute as much, right? So is that true? Do you all believe that? No? No? Yes? How many yes? How many no? It's really something that we have to address, right? We will need to do this. How much are you willing to pay? And I remind people of food, right? You can buy food, you can buy roadside food, or you can buy organic food. What are you willing to pay? You're putting that in your body, right? How much are you willing to pay for it? If you're driving a car, how much are you willing to pay a premium to have that oil or that petrol that you put in your car be have a surcharge for the carbon that you will put out, the emissions that you will generate when you use that petrol and drive from one place to another? How much more are you willing to pay? Are we willing to pay? And that's not a simple thing. So I, did what today we do, and we live in modern times. I went to Gen AI and said, okay, tell me how we can meet the cost of emissions control. And it gave me a very nice compilation. Went out in the web and searched up and said, out of everything that I have evaluated, there are a couple of ways of doing it. You can put a carbon tax. You can put an emissions trading system where you buy and trade. You emit more, so you pay someone else and buy up their credits so that you can emit more. There is a crediting agency. If you reduce your carbon footprint, you get a credit that you can then use as currency, and so on. So there are multiple ways of doing that. One of the things that is, and we'll end with this, is looking at the cost of generating energy with carbon emissions. So you look at all the ways with which you can generate energy and what it would cost. And there are people who do the economics on this. Part of this will also depend on what subsidies will be there or what subsidies already exist to make sure that we are going into alternative energies and not consuming oil and gas. And that will depend also on how much of a lobbying do various sectors make on the cost of other sectors. Because I don't understand this field very well, because I cannot really, I can do numbers any which way you want. You put a dollar sign in front of it and I make a mistake. I cannot balance my own checkbook. It's just something in my brain doesn't work. So I looked at this and said, okay, let me understand what is cap and trade. This is what carbon markets are mostly talking about when they say who will pay for it, right? So you have some sort of a limit that's placed on every company. That's your cap, and you cannot produce more than that. If you produce more than that, you have to have either a penalty that you pay, or you will need to have a budget that allows you to breach that cap. That's your state level or national level budget of carbon dioxide, or company level. So you have green credits, or you have carbon credits, whichever way you want to call it. So you have a air pollution program that defines how much you are allowed to put up, and this is meant against a certain reduction. In the US, there is also a tax that is levied, or a tax credit that you can get if you reduce your carbon dioxide footprint. Once you have that, then you can trade. If you are not emitting as much as your cap is, you have certain gap, you can trade that. You can trade that with other people. One of the dangers of this sort of a cap and trade is that countries that are not emitting as much might be more vulnerable because of the money it brings them. So there are, as with everything else, there are pros and cons of doing certain things. Each country has to decide how it will finance really tangible cost, expense, how will it be met. At the same time, as it's meeting those expenses, it will have to decide on a global level how to protect its country's interests. So that's the part which is really key to it, to remind us. In AR6, the last assessment report, that's when countries were requested to up their NDCs. I don't know if that is a good thing or a bad thing, because we're not meeting the goals anyway. So, but this is what India has pledged to do recently, to say there will be a way of maintaining a healthy and a sustainable way of living based on values of tradition, conservation, and moderation. The part is out here, there will be an emissions reduction by 45% in 2030. There is a pledge to have an additional carbon sink of 2.5 to 3 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent through afforestation. That's interesting, because that means that there will be large efforts to plant trees to make sure there is enough green cover. And then there is mobilizing domestic, new and additional funds to pay for it. If the Indian government follows through on this, you should expect to see larger investments for CCUS projects, larger investments for R&D, which will be needed to meet these pledges. Doesn't mean that will happen, but that's what it implies. The part which is going to be interesting is to see how much of a difference that will make on the NDCs and on India's scorecard. So I recommend to all of you is to follow on these pledges, but compare them with the scorecard that you have for the country out here, this one here. To follow that, to see what the new pledges are, and to see how far they're being met. Because that is really the opportunity that exists for everyone here to be able to meet the goals and to improve their sport. That's all that we can do, right? What other countries do is outside of our control. What we do is in our control. Okay, good. Thank you very much.